Now, welcome. We've lots to talk about, so it's going to be a Leinster-Munster special in many ways. We have Madigan Ruaidhri O'Connor ready to go. That is because Munster beat Leinster 31 points to 14 at Croke Park on Saturday. Just like a kind of electric shock to the rivalry in a big way, so loads to get into. We also should mention Ulster, brilliant win away to the Sharks, 34 points to 26. I think the Sharks had 12, 13 Springboks in their matchday squad. And Connacht 27, Bulls 28 was final score as well from the weekend. Our rugby coverage, as ever, is with thanks to Energia. They sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels, at grassroots with the AIL, and as official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht, the Irish men's and women's teams. And their Rugby for All initiative welcomes everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. To learn more about Energia's exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. So I guess I should mention as well, one of those questions was, well, who might Andy Farrell pick if the Leinster-Munster game had happened prior to him naming his squad? I think Tom Farrell have a chance. He has been called up alongside Jimmy O'Brien. News has come through. Mac Hansen has been ruled out of the Chicago game. They fly tomorrow, so Mac Hansen out, as is Edwin Adogbo, Brian Gleeson, both ruled out. So Tom Farrell is in, Jimmy O'Brien is in. There's no word on Stuart McCluskey, who went off injured for Ulster. The assumption is he's going to travel, though. And then Andy Farrell sweating on, albeit they are travelling, the fitness of Bundayaki, who has a hip issue, and Robbie Henshaw, who seemed to injure his groin at Croke Park. But they are travelling, and I guess they have, 10, 12 days to get ready for New Zealand. Rory, welcome.
Thanks, Joe.
Ian Madigan, you're there?
Yeah, thanks, Joe.
The gist of the reaction, Clayton McMillan, thrilled with the performance and saying now the big challenge is to raise our floor so there's less of a gap between our best and worst performances. Leo Cullen, a wake-up call. We're just not battle-hardened at the moment. Josh van der Fleer was talking alongside him, praising the attitude of Munster. They just got to a certain pitch, whereas he wasn't making excuses, but he was just saying it's messy season, disjointed. Lads in South Africa, we're doing our pre-season lines, not quite at it. Rud, how good for the rivalry? 15 of 16, that was the run we were on. I only realised sitting in to watch the game, it was all about Prendergast, Crowley, rightly or wrongly in my head. Hadn't even occurred to me that this would be this kind of a game, you know. I was so beaten down by the last few years. I was like, oh God, we're getting a game here.
Yeah.
What a bonus.
It's good for the soul, good for Irish rugby. There's nothing like going to a sporting event and having your expectations completely subverted in front of your eyes, and to see a team come of age is too strong, because obviously they won a league 2 or 3 years ago, but certainly put out their best performance, their most complete performance in maybe certainly in the URC. They've had a couple of great days in Europe, so I wouldn't like to undermine some of those performances they have put out over the years, but it was a really quintessential Munster performance. It was driven by a player who read and was aware of all of the build-up and the talk, and in Jack Crowley, who seized his moment. You know, he knew that, you know, the whole game was sold on that rivalry, and he appeared, and it's not often a player really lives up to the billing and relishes it and performs in the way that he did, and Munster fed off him. And to see Ty Byrne, you know, on the back of elbow surgery during the summer, which none of us knew about, just pick up where he left off in the Lions, and then everyone else to feed off that and row in behind it. And Clayton McMillan's theme during the week was that we didn't want to be the hunters, we wanted to be the hunters, and that we could never let up against them. And they just bought. You can see they're buying into what he has to offer at the moment, and this is exactly what Irish rugby needed. Ulster winning in South Africa is exactly what Irish rugby needed, because for the last few years it's been quite boring, and it's been waiting for Leinster to get to the end of the season to see if they do anything. And obviously Munster surprised us in 2023 by going, and surprised themselves by going to win in the URC. But really, this is what we want. These derbies should be events that we look forward to because of the contest, not just because of the Ireland squad plot points. And it felt like more than 50,000 people in Croke Park, and it felt like a lot more than, I don't know how many Munster fans were there. It was pockets, but the noise they made at the end was substantial and significant, and they really enjoyed it. And to see the players get up in the Leinster players' faces and really sew it into them, and you know, just the celebrations across the board, it was brilliant. It was a great event.
Yeah, you were there as well, Ian, covering the game for Premier. So maybe pick up on Rud's point. We'll get into the specifics of the game, but for Irish rugby, For Munster, even just like any kind of neutrals, even just watching the game, I think the beginnings over the last couple of games, you could see articles going, well, like, do we keep calling this a rivalry if one team keeps bossing the other? I mean, this was so needed.
Yeah, it was. And being honest, I didn't see it coming. Like I was probably lucky in the preview that we were doing last week that I didn't say, what I really thought was going to happen. But I'm comfortable in saying that, you look at the two teams. You've got an international team littered with Lions playing at home against a club team that, while they were 3 from 3, weren't performing amazingly well. The feeling was that Leinster had turned the corner against the Sharks. Now, that form line did take a hit at the weekend with Ulster beating the Sharks. It kind of showed how weak a side that was that Leinster played last week. But it was teed up. Prendergast, Crowley. It was exactly what we wanted. And as a contest, it had everything. It was even coming up to half time, you're thinking 21-7. We saw so many times last year where Leinster score before half time, score again after half time, and then suddenly it's 21-all, and you're going, oh, they've weathered that storm. But that didn't happen. And as Rudd touched on there, Clayton McMillan saying, hunt, don't be hunted. And then the other one is find a way. That was the theme of their preseason. And we saw that come through in the game at the weekend. And it's very impressive. Like, he's only been there, 3 months, and he's managed to embed this culture back into Munster. Not that it was gone, but it just felt different at the weekend. You look at that maul before half time, how important that was. Milne has managed to find a way to get a hand on Kelleher. They break up the maul, Tygburn comes through on, and then they just about hang on, get through to half time. The 15 minutes defense that they put together after halftime, that is, for me, season defining. They've found something there that we hadn't seen in previous years, and it really, really impressed me.
Well, let's because the second half was more of bodies on the line. We have to hold out Leinster kind of a performance, but first half they did most of their best work from an attacking point of view. Like, the signs were there relatively early, because I missed the first few minutes and Leinster scored a try, and I was like, okay, I've seen this game before, here we go. But then it was very apparent there was a crispness to Munster handling, like even the Nankiville spin in the middle of the pitch, where pass out the back, and right across the board there was a crispness to what they were doing. And I suppose it's hard not to talk Jack Crowley too quickly here, but Ian, you can give us a sense of what they were doing in attack as well as the handling. There was just a variety to his kicking game, which was causing problems. Like, there was a crossfield kick to Tacker Abrams off scrum, which got Munster to within 5 metres, which led to their first try, the Brian Gleeson try. And then I suppose where you really knew, there's something kind of cooking here, was just maybe 10 minutes after that, which is the Crowley kick for Tom Farrell. So off line out, lots of deception, lots of things going on. A little pop kick by Crowley, and Farrell gets up and wins it and scored the try. And at that stage, they're just so on top and they're rampant. And that period, it's really impressive from an attacking point of view.
Yeah, it was. And, we look at all the stats across the board, and there's certain stats that used to be more relevant than they are now. For me, the 4 key stats in a game of rugby are the speed of your ruck ball. So what speed can you have it when you're attacking? You want it as quick as possible. What speed are you giving the opposition? Munster did that really well. They slowed Leinster's ball down, yet they were able to get quick ruck ball when they needed it. The aerial contest, with the escorting rules changing, putting up accurate kicks and being able to contest the ball in the air. Munster had 28 kicks. They retained 6 of them. Leinster had 13. They retained 1. 2 of those led to tries for Munster. The other one is dominant tackles, because dominant tackles lead to turnovers. When a player makes a dominant tackle, you pile in and you counter ruck. Munster did that really well. They had 15 turnovers versus Leinster's 5 turnovers. And then the other big stat that England pride themselves on is kick meters. So Munster kicked the ball, as I said, 28 times for 800 meters. Leinster kicked the ball 13 times for 330 meters. They're the 4 areas that are really crucial to come out on top of the scoreboard. Munster dominated. The rush defence that we know Leinster employ and has been very good to them over the last 12 to 18 months. You have two options when you're attacking against that. You can either go over it with the kicking game, chip kicks, crossfield kicks, or you can find the right depth and have the accuracy and the bravery to go to the space around them. And we saw Munster do that brilliantly. The crossfield kick to tackle is a really difficult skill. You're kicking the ball across your body. It's very easy to overcook it or to get blocked. And Crowley just exudes this confidence, and that's what you want from your out half. You want your teammates to be looking at you going, this guy's in total control. Yes, everything's not going to come off, but it was just, even when it didn't, it was just straight on to the next ball. And then the confidence to go for the chip kick. Like, the Munster are only 35 metres out from the Leinster try line there. You can go sustain pressure, look to build phases, but they pulled the trigger straight off the bat. Bit of deception out the back. And it was just Tom Farrell chasing it. And then he's the bravery to get his hand up. Fantastic piece of skill to score the try. And then also the scrum move that they had in the first half, where they know where the space is and it's just about getting it there. And the out the back pass that Nankivell pulled off was exceptional. So it was clear though that it was Crowley who was leading it. Even how, like, when he'd received the ball in the backfield, his confidence to take on James Lowe, Robbie Henshaw, Gibson Park. And I think he beat, 5, 6, 7 defenders alone in the first half. And that created opportunities for Munster. And it was just crucial that he kept their pack on the front foot. And he did that throughout the game.
Yeah. Crowley, the attack, that period in the first half.
Yeah, I'm going to try and talk about it without talking about what Leinster did, because I think Leinster didn't help themselves at all, and Munster found real weaknesses in what Leinster did. But I thought the tone was set by Crowley taking a fairly nothing kick from Prendergast and returning it with interest. And every time they kicked to him, he wasn't interested in just kicking it back to them. And often they put him in a difficult position, but he found his way out of it. That extra yard of speed that he's found over the summer, that bit of physical confidence that he's got from the pre-season that he's put down. He and Sam Prendergast finished last season with disappointment in their minds, because they both missed out in the lines. Obviously, Crowley had more disappointment because he'd missed out. He's lost his Ireland jersey. Munster season hadn't gone the way they wanted, but he's managed to use his summer so well to come back in physically and mentally brilliant condition. And you can just see it from every decision he makes. He believes it's the right decision. Even though he got charged down at one stage, he ran into contact, got turned over at another stage. He just got up and they were gone, those moments. Last season, I think those bad moments dwelled in his mind. He was getting in his own way at times around this time of year. And that was part of the reason he lost his place in the Ireland squad. Partly was the kind of sheer chaos of what was going on at Munster, whereas now there's a clarity of purpose around them. But as he didn't have Casey alongside him. Coughlin stepped in and was brilliant himself. But he's lost the other leader in his halfback partnership, and he doesn't seem to be bothered by it. Imagine that Casey was there on Saturday, how well would Munster have won? Because Casey gives them so much more authority and allows a bit more space for Crowley to kind of think his way through the game as well, whereas a lot of what he did was on instinct. This crispness of his pass, like Leinster were probably a second off in terms of their line speed. Him and Nankivell beating the blitz with the speed of thought, but also the sleight of hand. It was sensational, and you could see Leinster lose belief because of it.
Yeah.
And it was a real signature performance from him. And Munster rode in behind, and loads of their players. It's not just about him, but he was the one who set the tone. After the first 7 minutes, where they were absolutely destroyed, lost 3 scrum penalties in a row, conceded a penalty off the maul. It felt so much like last season. And yet, once Leinster made one mistake, or one or two mistakes, because they made plenty of mistakes within the game, which I'm sure we'll get on to, it was Crowley was ready to punish them and to sow belief into his team.
It could be such a significant summer in his career. I dare say some people, he must have asked around, how do you think I should handle this summer? It's been a long season, demanding season, psychologically, physically. I guarantee you some people would have said to him, go away, lie on a beach for a few weeks, rest. You need to rest now. It's the best thing you can do. I'm sure that was one of the very real options available to him. And to go completely the other way now looks to be so vindicated, as you said, just physically. I mean, when he stepped inside Larmour and Gibson Park hunting him down about 15 minutes in, and the crowd cheer, and then he kicks off his left foot, and these steps all evening. Like, even his kick for Farrell, that try, if you watch it again, it's not a good pass by Ethan Rafferty. Like, it's high, it's on his inside shoulder, and 10 minutes later, Snyman throws a similar one to Van der Fleer, and it just goes through his arm. But like, it's caught, it's gathered without even thinking. He's just so on top of it.
He's in flow.
And I have to say, Ian, I thought pre-game, as much as like, geez, media, like it's all we're doing, I thought the kind of head-to-head Prendergast versus Crowley thing was somewhat overblown. It felt very unlikely to me that one game would shift the balance of power overly, and our halves don't. It's not like they come up against each other in a kind of a direct way half the time. And yet I'd say there's a lot of people now who suddenly say, well, like Andy Farrell, even if he's got a kind of slight leaning towards Prendergast, which seems to be the case, I'm not sure on the basis of what we've just seen on Saturday, I'm not sure Farrell can pick him. I think Farrell has to pick Crowley.
I'd agree with you. I think you have to go with your form guy, and Crowley is most certainly that. I was trying to frame it before the game. I was like, while Prendergast has played 2 and lost 2, it's against very different opposition. Crowley's played 2 and won 2, again against different opposition. But I was also trying to balance it off on the other side by saying, well, Prendergast is playing with the star-studded pack in front of him with one of the best scrum halves in the world in Gibson Park. It's not going to be a fair head-to-head on the day with the pack that Crowley had. But I don't think Crowley was too bothered by that. He had that kind of look in his eye that I'm getting after it today, and I'm going to put my own imprint on this game. But within, as Rudd touched on there, within the structure and the game plan that McMillan was implementing. And that's probably the biggest change I've seen with Crowley. Like, we go back to the Six Nations that Ireland won, and full credit to him. It was his first Six Nations campaign. Winning it is a fantastic achievement. But within that, did he go off script a little bit? Was it the same for periods of last year where, and look, he can pull the rabbit out of the hat, because he's physically so gifted, he can decide to carry and ship it far better than majority of out halves. But the big change I've seen with him this year is his ability to get the players around him on the same hymn sheet. And that's why I think Munster are firing now, because he's leading that, but he's leading it by bringing everyone along with them.
Okay. That's very interesting, because, we can all see the rabbit out of the hat stuff, but that kind of the bread and butter of being a 10 has improved. We'll come back to him and Prendergast in a moment, but then just to stay with the game, second half, like it's kind of defending that they're under their own sticks for a huge proportion of it, Rudd. And at that stage, Tyburn says to Jack Crowley, "I'll take over here." So he had 5 of their turnovers, which is extraordinary. I couldn't work out the extent to which Munster were absolutely phenomenal in defence and Leinster drifted into being completely one-dimensional.
It's always a bit of both. Leinster definitely weren't on it at all. And again, I think it's important to talk about how Munster won it rather than how Leinster lost it, because we're here to, often we analyse Ireland against New Zealand, we're really only talking about Ireland, whereas we got 2 teams to talk about here. I thought Leinster thought they could just go through Munster. I think they were, they had limited time to prepare. Most of their squad didn't go to South Africa. The squad that played here, they had a game last week, a game this week. They're still getting lads back in. So you simplify things to a degree. First half, they were absolutely wild with their offloading and didn't have any respect for the ball, and that completely undermined them. It wasn't just him though.
I know, but he was particularly eye-catching.
He almost has a license to do it, but then when Max Deegan starts doing it, James Ryan starts doing it, they just all start just lashing the ball away, even sometimes before contact, with no real regard for it. It was almost like they were afraid of Byrne and didn't want to die with the ball because they thought he might get over it. But they used to make plans. They used to have Tyburn scrum caps. Someone might wear Tyburn scrum cap in training when they played against the Scarlets, and they'd blitz him and take him out of it. So, they should back themselves to be able to beat Tyburn at the breakdown. So, I guess we found out in the second half that maybe they were right to not go to ground, because when they went to ground, Byrne went to town on them. I know they were a bit unhappy with some of the refereeing around the breakdown, that they felt like the Munster tacklers were often rolling into their clearers and Byrne was profiting off that. But again, you've got to play the ref and understand what Gianluca Necchi was going to do. Byrne was brilliant. He was just he made all the Leinster players who were coming in for the first game look terrible, because Leo Cullen can offer up the excuse that they haven't played, but either he'd had surgery, he had a completely disjointed pre-season, and then he comes out and gives this performance. A player of, obviously, a fella from Kildare who they let go nearly 10 years ago now, is coming out into this game, and it seems to matter more to him than what the Leinster players are putting out there, and he hasn't got that same struggle maybe at the moment with that Leinster, that Munster versus Ireland thing, which I think is something we should talk about. But in terms of him coming out and delivering that for his team and his first performance, what that says to the players around them, and the way they fed off him, it was completely chaotic for them as well. They'd lost their starting number 8 at one stage. John Ryan was playing on the blindside flank at 37 years of age, having already locked down a scrum or struggled in a scrum at times for 40 or 50 minutes. I mean, there was loads of stuff going on. John Klein coming off the bench was brilliant in terms of those physical battles. Coombs came off the bench and was superb in terms of getting involved in that physical battle. And they won the physical battle, which no one expected them to do apart from themselves. Jack O'Donoghue as well was big in there. I'm sure I'm leaving people out. Even Milne, who struggled at times at scrum time, but he fronted up physically. Jeremy Lockman comes on and does a really good job. So that there was players who they played better against Leinster on Saturday than they had done in the previous 5, 6, 7, 8 fixtures. And then the belief they'll have when Leinster come to Thomond Park at Christmas will be absolutely huge, because now they've done it. And they've shown that these lads are not superhuman, that they're well able to go toe-to-toe to them. And that's only good for the rivalry. So I think you feed off your leaders like that. When leaders like Ty Byrne and Jack Crowley arrive and perform on the biggest days like that, everyone just gets a buzz off that, and when the opposition is off it in the way that Leinster were, it's even better for them.
Perfect storm. Ian, your perspective on that dynamic in the second half, where it was, for large portions of it, Leinster camped and Munster very successfully in the main, but defending with their backs against the wall.
Yeah, I think tied into it is Rudd's point about the Leinster offloading. It did cross my mind the same way that Rudd explained it there, that where Leinster trying to offload the ball more because they were concerned about the turnover threats. I don't think so. And maybe it was in the player's head, but I'd be surprised if that was a coach's message. And I was thinking the exact same thing. Are they trying to avoid this? To go to an offloading game, it requires less effort. It certainly requires loads of skill, but less effort. Hard work is when you actually get tackled, you're in the wrestle, you get hit to the ground, you've got to wrestle free, you've got to push the ball back. That's actually really tiring. I thought in the first half, Leinster weren't earning the right to offload. They weren't winning the contact zone. The best offloads come when you've beaten someone on a soft shoulder and you're somewhat halfway through the gap, you get your hands free, and then the offload comes. We can keep Orgy Sneyman out of the conversation here because he's just such an athletic specimen that his ability to get his hands free, his height is a big advantage, his power is a big advantage. But Rudd touched on some of the other players that were forcing these offloads. And when you've got Prendergast as your 10, he actually craves on structure. Like, he likes to see, okay, there's 4 defenders over there. I'm going to have 6 attackers. If I slot myself in here, I'll run this move. I'll unlock the defense that way. What he's less suited to is kind of free-flowing, open play. Like, that's not necessarily where his strengths lie. And I felt like he just struggled to get a handle on his game in the first half. And that was partly because what players were doing around him. The other part, Gibson Park had a poor game at the weekend. His selection of pass, the number of passes that didn't go to hand, how Leinster use penalty advantage is quite often how they really get a stranglehold on teams, because you can throw caution to the wind, but you can also apply significant pressure and force a team to infringe multiple times, and that can quite often lead to yellow cards. When Leinster got their penalty advantage 3-4 occasions in the first half, they turned the ball over nearly immediately, which is missed opportunities. Tying into your point on like how well Munster got bodies in front and ultimately stopped the Leinster attack. When Leinster are attacking off 9, the forwards are trying to create soft shoulders by running good lines. You've got 3 or 4 Leinster forwards running at what they will call best space, either inside or outside the opponent defenders, and then it's up to the 9 to pick the best option. And Leinster do this really well because you've got the likes of Josh van der Fleer, Porter, Furlong, running at soft shoulders. They win the contact, they clear the ruck immediately, and then that allows Leinster to play on top or potentially move the ball to the backs. They weren't able to generate quick ball at the weekend. So Munster kept getting set, kept getting bodies in front, putting two in the tackle, and it really frustrated Leinster. And they didn't adjust their game plan. That was something that disappointed me at the weekend. That was plan A. Let's go out and bully these guys and just take them on up front, get that front foot ball, and that will be enough to get the win. It wasn't working and they didn't change. And it got to 65 minutes and it felt like the game was over.
It's true. It's undermined by the fact they did get a late try, but it felt like the longer it went on, the less likely they were somehow to score. Like, it's hard to know how worried they should be or how bad they're feeling. Like, I can see a world where they kind of think, second half we dominated and we'll get up to speed and find ways to score tries with that level of pressure again. And also first half, like Munster have this kind of great, Leinster start well, then Munster have this great spell, kind of 15 minutes to 30 minutes where Crowley is to the fore and the kicking game. And, Leinster are definitely under the caution in a massive way during that period. But then like that kind of crucial 28, 29 minutes through to half time, like I was just jotting notes as I went. Leinster got their hands on the ball, started going through the phases. There was a weird moment where Prendergast has a terrible kick at the end of a lot of phases to Tacker Abrams takes a mark. So, that was a strange choice on his part. But nonetheless, like Leinster really on top then. And then clearance goes to Lowe and they start going at them again. And they're making real headway here. This is kind of 33, 34 minutes. And Lowe has a knock on, which can just happen, but it took the air out of things. But then Leinster come again. You might remember Munster were done at scrum for not pushing. And Leinster then are really building more pressure. And this is more pressure. And this is 5, 6, 7 minutes of it now. And then it's the intercept. And it is that subtle, not so subtle difference between 7 points to 21 and 14 points apiece. Ifs and buts I appreciate, but and then even after the try again, Leinster on top again, and it results in that maul where you mentioned Millen got his hands on Kelleher, and it's it's another big moment, and they go in 7-21 at half time. I can sort of see a world, Rudd, where Leinster in the cold light of day might feel, okay, we're a little bit off it. We won't say this out too loud, but it's not as bad as it looks, maybe.
Yeah, I think if there was an XP, I'd say Leinster would be looking at it going, we left an awful lot behind. I mean, the amount of times we had penalty advantage and didn't take it, they were terrible on penalty advantage. It was shocking how often they get penalty advantage and then just completely, it just felt like they thought there'd be another opportunity along any minute now, and it doesn't really matter what we do here. They didn't have that. They weren't dialed into the jeopardy of the game. It's like they didn't think that Munster could beat them. They showed up thinking they could. I think some of them had their head on the Ireland squad starting on Monday. I think there's definitely a sense I have that's creeping in there, and that there's an issue there that's lingering from last season, and that's why I would be worried about them, because
expand on that for a second.
Well, I think this was of a piece with the Northampton game. There's towards the end of last season, particularly in the aftermath of the Northampton game, there was real noises coming out of Leinster of dissatisfaction between the players and Leo Cullen, between factions within the squad, and a sense also that the Irish players were not fully, well, they had their minds elsewhere, and especially the Lions, as they started to pick up injuries towards the end and were pulling out of URC knockout games. And on the morning of the game on Saturday, 2 Ireland squad members pulled out of the game. Now, I'm sure they had bona fide injuries, but one of them is in the same position as Matt Hansen, who got injured the night before. So there's definitely a suspicion. And if you were of a mind in that dressing room to go, hang on a second, that's going to just eat into that sense of togetherness and of everyone being on the same page. Like Leo Cullen's gone in today to do a debrief or a review of that game, and there's only 5 or 6 players who played in it in there. There's 21 of them are off, 22 now that Jimmy O'Brien's been called up, are off in Carton House and the HBC in Blanchardstown getting ready for Chicago, and he won't see them again. So you're saying, okay, Leinster can take the chances that they had on Saturday. Well, they won't train together as a Leinster team playing under the Jacques Nienaber system and all of, under Tyler Blyndall and Robin McBride until December, when they're facing Harlequins and what they're not having a great start to the season either. So a winnable European game, but still you're talking about 5-6 weeks of we're operating under a completely different system with Andy Farrell towards a completely different goal, which Farrell is obviously brilliant at getting them in and going, hang on, we have this purpose towards the 2027 World Cup. This is our whole thing. And I think Cullen, and look, the small violins will be out everywhere else because everyone would like to have 22 members of the Ireland squad available to them. But there is a massive management challenge in trying to pull those players back in and get them focused on this other thing, especially when you've had your entire operation undermined by the Northampton game. And I still don't think they've recovered from that. I think it just shattered everything in some ways. Another factor is Jack Nienaber wasn't there at the weekend. He's gone home to South Africa for personal reasons. That will have affected their preparations. There are definite mitigations to the fact that they didn't play pretty well on Saturday. But when you look at their last 5-6 months, it's been a very damaging couple of months for the coaching ticket, for the squad. And I think there's a lot of healing to be done. The problem is they're not together to heal and find their way through it.
So can I make sure I'm hearing you right then? Because I remember we talked about this at the time. So to be very clear, we're not casting aspersions on anybody saying somebody who could have played dodged.
There are people within the squad who believe that some of the lines pulled themselves out when they could have played for Leinster.
Which is a separate point. So whether they could have or couldn't, we're not saying, we don't know. We're not their physio. We didn't examine them. But your sources, which are rock solid, I'm sure, there is that sense of acrimony. There are some players who are looking at some of those lines and just a sense of, are your priorities with this URC game or with the lines with Ireland, with bigger days? So, Ian, if that's the case, that is obviously not an ideal atmosphere. And Rudd's point is well made, like the period to try and knit it all back together. Because I dare say, and I'm guessing, but like some of the players who might be looking at the so-called lines with a degree of suspicion, they were probably in South Africa because that's the games they tend to play, and the lines are going through pre-season, and then they come together for this Munster game, and now the lines disappear again, or the Irish players disappear again, and that is a job of work for Leo Cullen, who himself is probably undermined by the team selection against Northampton. So you mix all that together, and if you buy all that, then it is a more serious situation than just they didn't take their chances against Munster.
No, like there's lots going on, and that disjointed pre-season, you've got international players, Lions players, standard club players, all on different programs. How you can train in the gym with your running, with your pitch sessions, I'd say it was just very disjointed. Rudd touched on it there. You've 22 of your squad gone to camp. Of the team at the weekend, probably 15 of them aren't going to be in that review meeting today. You're coming up against, or even another URC game this week against Zebra. You want to see a response, but you're giving those team messages to guys that weren't playing in the game. The reality is you're giving it to an inexperienced group, guys who are fighting for their own contracts, trying to step up and work their way into the Leinster first team. The messaging is totally different. Yeah. So,
and sorry to interrupt. What do you make of that aspect of the slight disharmony in the camp? I'm sure, by the way, it's a tale as old as time. But the fact it's sort of leaking out, that's less usual with Leinster.
Yeah, it is, and it's hard to know what happened. Like it wouldn't shock me if Andy Farrell was looking at his hand and going, "Well, looks like Mac Hansen's unavailable. Should I put in a call to Leo Cullen here and say, would it be possible to rotate Tommy O'Brien out?" I'm not saying that happened, but it could have. Or if the international physios are in the loop and they're saying, look, Jack's touch and go, Tommy's touch and go. If they play, it could really set them back, right? So they've prioritised Ireland over Leinster. I don't know if that's happening, but what I would say is you've got to control the controllables. And you look at how Tyg Byrne pitched up and how he performed. It wasn't an excuse for him. I don't really know, Joe. I wish I had more answers on it, and I've to be kind of careful in what I'm saying, because it's not actually backed by anything. If I was telling you something here, it's not backed by anything. So, I feel for Leinster because it was just disjointed, but at the same time, there is also an element that when you're in that job for such a long period of time and you're telling the same group of players week in, week out, you're not getting picked, these are the reasons, that there will come a time when a fresh voice will be needed. And there's no doubt, like, Leo is under pressure and he'll know that himself, because you start off the season, regardless of winning the league last year, you've lost 3 of your opening 4. You've effectively lost 4 of your last 5 if you throw in the European game. And while there was a great league win last year, I don't think it's won over, supporter sentiment. So the supporters demand a European trophy, and they're gutted with that from last year.
And is there there's definitely a world, by the way, just to completely flip it then, there is a world where honestly the season has not started yet. It's just the reality. And I'd say particularly the Lions players, long year, perfectly entitled to we're still getting up to speed. Like, we're still in pre-season basically. This is one game. Munster were primed for it. Let us get through November, and then look, we'll start to pick it up come European time. And what has been the value of blitzing teams all year and losing in Europe for the last 5-6 years anyway? Maybe let's have a slow start.
Well, this could be the making of Leinster, that they get in
now we're really flipping.
But it could be there's good enough players in there that they get in December. And Leo Cullen, who was discussed, Leo Cullen comes in and he gives an 18-minute press conference, and he's everyone's heard how Leo communicates. It's very even keel. He smiles and he jokes. But the content of what he said was scathing. He said we were second best in terms of our work rate, our grit and our determination.
It was similar actually. Northampton, again, said with a velvet glove on, but the lines were devastating in print.
Absolutely. And he is landing messages to his team because he's not going to get a chance to do a review with them. And he talked about how he and his team worked like dogs to narrow the gap on Munster. And they brought down an empire in 2009. And he has done everything in his power to keep his foot on Munster throats for more than a decade. And then he witnessed a group of players go out there and absolutely hand the rivalry back to Munster with an emphatic victory. And, Munster players celebrating and whooping and hollering in their faces in Croke Park. And that hurt them. And I think that the implication from him was that it has to hurt you too, as much as it hurts me. And it could cost him his job. And we know that the players will be the players. But if he, and when Niamh Aber comes back and when the coaches get back and they get this group together after the November internationals and they draw a line in the sand and they have maybe an Enfield moment and they go, if someone, and I don't know who that person is because so many of the middle tier players are gone now. There's no Rhys Ruddock in that squad now. Maybe it's a Luke McGrath, but I'm not sure I see it. Ross Byrne or Ross Maloney, they're both gone now. They have lost a kind of a tier of Leinster players who would play for Ireland sometimes but wouldn't be centrally involved. The players in that profile really are quite young, apart from maybe Max Deegan. But there needs to be a coming together. But they're more than good enough to find a way, and they're more than good enough to execute the way they didn't execute on Saturday. To not throw that intercept, to keep their structure. Even just the game rhythm that they'll get over the course of a season, they won't be as loose as they were. I'm not writing them off, but I do think there is a hangover from Northampton that is lingering, and a lot of the questions that we were asking in May and June that kind of, in my mind, went away because I just stopped thinking about Leinster for a while. It's quite evident to me watching the South Africa games and this one that a lot of the issues are still there and unresolved. But of course, there's loads of time to resolve. There's 70 points to be played for in the URC season. All they need is top 8 to have a chance of winning it. Yeah. Obviously, the higher you go, the better chance you have to win it. They haven't even started Europe yet. No one's writing them off. But Cullen needs to get this together, and the senior players need to row in behind them, and they need to be on the same page by the time they start hitting the really important stuff later on.
Okay.
Yeah, I just on the peaking point, that is really important. That is the strength and conditioning that the team is gearing up for, the different types of training, ramping up for the right time of the season. And there's no doubt there will have been a review on why they didn't get over the line in previous years, and maybe they've looked to change things to peak later in the year. Now, when you do that, you're taking the risk that you still get over the line in a certain amount of games at the start of the season. And that's the kind of fine line that you've got to thread. And I think Leo touched on it himself. Maybe they've got that wrong this part of the season, but could they go on a run around Christmas? And that's all that will matter. You get into the last 16 of Europe, which they will do, a home quarter, you're into a semi-final, and then this Leinster team can still go on a run of 10 unbeaten games in the URC. One thing that I will say with Leo, and I'd agree with Rudd, like it was scathing from him. But like he'll be disappointed in himself that he didn't get a tune out of the group. And it's something that he did really well as a coach, or does really well as a coach, and Leinster does really well as a club. They'll bring in, for example, a past player to hand out the jerseys, say a few words to the team beforehand. I wonder, did he do that, something like that at the weekend, or was the messaging to stay in system as opposed to be the hunted?
Yeah.
Don't be the hunted, hunt, as McMillan said.
I thought it was very telling when Van der Fleer, and he wasn't banging the table either, but a few times in his post-match, he came back to the attitude of Munster, the pitch they were at, and ... The unsaid part is we just weren't, So on Prendergast, like we've been effusive there about Crowley and his all-round performance. Prendergast, you mentioned, doesn't thrive when players around him are a little bit loosey and the structure kind of goes out of it, so that didn't play to his strengths. In general terms, say someone in that Irish selection meeting for Chicago is trying to still argue for Prendergast and continuity, and someone says, well, how do you think he went against Munster? What did he do well against Munster? What's the answer to that?
He still did plenty well. Like, for me, it looks like he's a little bit low on confidence. I think the first thing that we're looking to do is build him back up. Like, he's a high quality player.
What suggests he's low on confidence?
I think how he carried his ball, or how he carried himself, the next ball focus that Crowley showed when he made a mistake, it was water off a duck's back, it was on to the next, just calling the ball on himself and being really commanding. That's what, like, Crowley steps two guys and then manages to get himself back into the play for the next phase. He just wanted to be on the ball all the time. Prendergast, not so much. And it's funny when you're in a head-to-head like that. Like, I remember playing against Paddy Jackson when we were kind of vying, probably really for the second spot. But, if you're not second, you're nowhere. And I'd be playing against Paddy and I'd be like, God, he's off to a good start here. Yeah. He's playing really well. Yeah. It does get in on you a bit, and Crowley was electric in that first kind of 20 minutes. Does it put a little bit of pressure on you to then pull something out yourself? And it just wasn't quite happening for him. And games can also unfold a certain way that they just go against you. And I remember saying that to Joe Schmidt, and he famously just said, well, you got to make it unfold the way you want. That's what you've got to do. But when it ended up like him getting into situations where he had to take on Munster defenders, but it wasn't the situation that he wants to take them on. He wants to take them on when they're short on numbers. They're looking to drift off him, and then he can kind of side through. Crowley, on the other hand, is happy taking on in busy traffic because he's physically so strong.
Yeah. It's funny, I have Andy Farrell's book in my head, but like Farrell would talk as well about how small thing, he loves when a kicker kicking to the corner ekes out every metre. Prendergast has that in his locker. Like, he's an amazing kicker. I thought
he did it early in the second half. The one like right to 5 meters.
Okay.
He missed
conservative ones as well, though. I wonder.
Yeah, I think it was like
a confidence point. I wonder.
It was a very difficult day for the kickers, which made Crowley's place kicking all the more impressive. But like, there was a swirling. It was one of those classic Croke Park days where you weren't quite sure which way the wind was blowing. I think it was going into Hill 16, but it was swirling a bit. And Prendergast did miss one in the first half, but he did get everything out of one early in the second half.
Okay.
He just didn't assert himself on the game in the way Crowley did. Like, he probably had a 6 out of 10 performance. Some of his passing was very crisp. But he's renowned for being able to control the team around them and to keep the team in shape. That's one of the things he's supposed to be really good at, is kind of organising the team as they go. Yeah. He can't account for the fact that Gibson Park had a poor game. Henshaw was okay, went off early. Ringrose had a poor game on his first game back. Like, we don't know what mental state Ringrose is in coming back after pulling himself out of a Lions test. He must have some doubts as he goes into contact. So he has to get through this return to play. So that's hard. It's tough enough on him. Osborne didn't have a great day behind them. So he's second guessing himself. And that does have an impact. And they're not getting the physical dominance that Prendergast probably expected to get. But at the same time, as Ian said, it's up to him to take control. And often he ended up going himself and not very convincingly. And I remember the day he made his first start, I wrote that he had main character energy, that he was like, as soon as he walked onto the pitch, he looked like the star of the show. He's lost that. assertiveness or confidence and swagger that he had. And maybe that's part of it. That's just part of the process he's gone to. He's been put up there, he's been knocked down, he's got loads of criticism, loads of online abuse. His brother spoke brilliantly in June about how it affected him and the family in an interview with Keane, actually. He won Young Player of the Year awards for both Leinster and at the Rugby Players Ireland Awards, and was almost sheepish when receiving them. It definitely had an impact on him, and maybe he needs a period where he's coming off the bench and that Crowley's the main man, where he rebuilds that confidence, and maybe he does it in a Leinster jersey while also playing still learning at Ireland training. But I think to persist with him in the Ireland 10 jersey, based on what we've seen, would make it very difficult for him, because he doesn't pick himself, but everyone can see that Crowley's the player who's in form. So if Farrell goes against that and puts Prendergast in a very difficult position, he will clearly go out and try and do his best for Ireland, and maybe that's how he finds form. Farrell will believe in him, and having that belief will help. But from an external point of view, it would look very unfair on Jack Crowley and make Prendergast very unpopular, and we'll get another wave of that stuff that comes and can knock him down. I think it has to be Crowley in a couple of weeks' time, because otherwise, what's the point in playing all these games? He's clearly in form. He's clearly top of his game. He's making things happen. And the big problem for Ireland and Chicago in 2 weeks' time is that very few players have played many minutes.
Yeah.
So I think Andy Farrell has to back players like Tyburn and Jack Crowley. Even Van der Fleer, not maybe based on Saturday, but the previous week, players who've shown form early, who've hit the ground running. Because if you want players to play themselves into form against the All Blacks, isn't the way to do it.
No, and this must be a big worry for them. Were he to pick Prendergast again, it's an extension of the gamble he's already taken with Prendergast, which is to promote him early in the hope that the potential he sees blossoms. But Farrell said himself, even just last week, like, if you throw players in too young, you can damage them. It's hard not to feel that by being a lightning rod for criticism, that Prendergast has suffered psychologically. That you're both saying you see the confidence that was there not being there, and there's such a difference. Sorry, please come in. But I was just going to say, there's such a difference for Prendergast in being the kind of wonder kid that everyone loves, coming off the bench with 20 minutes to go, 25 minutes to go for Crowley, and go out there and have your great moments, versus being this lightning rod now, scrutinised like ceaselessly for the guts of a year. He is 21 years old. He is listening to everything. He's watching everything. He knows he shouldn't. People are telling him to ignore it. He is watching everything. He's reading everything. He's listening to everything. That is, I would be 100% certain of that. And he's playing like somebody that has a lot of voices on his shoulder. And to your point, when Crowley steps inside Larmer and Gibson Park and clears with his left and is putting in kicks and playing really well, I guarantee you, already in his head, Prendergast is imagining the online chat now. And I think there is a chance here that Farrell may have to recognise this gamble has not paid off, and to continue to put him back out there may not be best for him.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think like the positives that Prendergast offer, he's a real strategist. Rudd touched on it there, how he plots the team around. When he's doing that, he impressed me so much in multiple games last year, how he did that. His passing is excellent. His ability to take it to the line, his kicking out of hand is generally excellent. His tackling at the weekend, he did step up physically a few times where, like, he's being criticised. He did that well. He played well in the Bulls game, and a couple of moments at the end, the missed drop goal, the missed penalty, and then I'd say the abuse he got off the back of that, I'd say he was a bit fed up, going, well, I actually put together a good performance. There's lots of guys who didn't play well, yet I'm the one copping all the criticism. Yeah. And that's what happens when you're playing out half. When things are going well, you can sometimes get more credit than you actually deserve. But when things are going badly, a lot is going to fall at your feet, and that's certainly happening to him. Certainly happening to him at the moment. One thing that does frustrate me, and you hear it sometimes, you hear people talking about the ceiling of players.
Yeah.
Right. And this was coming up last year. Prendergast has a higher ceiling than Crowley. That's trying to predict the future, right? And sometimes players don't fulfill their predicted ceiling. And I'm not saying that Prendergast won't go on to be a brilliant out half. I think he will. But Crowley maybe is showing that his ceiling is actually higher than you thought it was. Maybe I've got more layers than you originally thought.
The other thing is, the gamble doesn't have to pay off against the All Blacks in 2 weeks' time. The gamble is the 2027 gamble. And if you're flipping it and looking at it positively, Andy Farrell's now got one Six Nations campaign into one young number 10 who's 25 years old. Yeah. He's got one Six Nations campaign into a 21-year-old. He has a couple of more options. He doesn't have that established senior tier of player unless he brings Carberry back or the RFU bring Carberry back next year. But right now, even if he goes in with Crowley and Prendergast, they've both got a good amount of experience in there. And Prendergast, he still has loads of time to make mistakes before Australia 27. So we don't need him to be ready now. And Ireland don't need either of them to be ready now. Crowley's gone out and sought a bit of help with Andrew Conway. He works with Andrew Conway and his mental skills. Prendergast's parents are both leadership coaches, so maybe he has that, in his own back pocket anyway. But I think he just needs the time to find himself again and find his form again. And I think by keeping on putting him out there when he's not playing, when someone else is playing better than him, would just, as we said, damage him further. But it's way too soon to write either of these players off. And the investment that's been made in them, you would hope will pay off. But as I said, it doesn't have to pay off in 2 weeks' time. Go with the guy who's playing well now. It could easily flip by the Six Nations. It could flip again by the summer. This is it's open season. Yeah, no one's saying it's going to be Crowley forever or Prendergast forever. It should be whoever's playing better.
Yeah, it's a fair point. Farrell could definitely summon an argument. Is this not exactly what we want 2 years out from a World Cup?
And Crowley used this period last year. He's come back better than he was before. So that competition has driven him to a new place. So that's the positive flip of it. So Prendergast is at a low point now, but there's no reason to think that he couldn't come back stronger.
Well, let's park Prendergast Crowley chat until next week. Come here, Mads. Is Crowley kicking off a different tee?
No, but he kicked the ball well at the weekend. The one he hit in the second half, it was really windy. Like, it was a real blustery wind. I didn't think it was particularly favouring any side. But it's probably 47, 48 metres on the angle into the hill 16, which is typically where the wind is going to gust in from the corners. And the strike he gets on that is perfection. So when it's windy like that, you want the ball turning over with slow revolutions. If it's turning over quickly, the wind's going to beat it and it's going to veer off course. That really impressed me. And just his alignment into it, how long he was through the kick. He's still using the low tee, but look, he can find the sweet spot with it. And it just looked way better than what it did towards the end of last year, where he was setting up the ball kind of on a bit of a slant, trying to open up the sweet spot. He's parked that, which is good to see, because it's hard to keep consistency when you're doing that. But it's also just confidence. Sometimes it's you can talk about all these technicalities, but it's just about getting up and having total belief, and he did that.
Yeah. Any other business from Croke Park we should mention? Munster now 4 for 4, are they?
Yeah, it's what a way to start.
Because they've had a habit of we have to dig ourselves out of a hole again.
Yeah, they're in a commanding position. They play Connacht on Saturday, and I don't know who's going to play scrum half for them, because Casey's away with Ireland and both Patterson and Coughlin went off injured. Jack Crowley finished the game playing scrum half. But the emotion that they got out of that last couple of minutes, Dan Kelly, who's only there about a month, grabbing the jersey and whipping up the Croke Park crowd. Gavin Coombs, enjoying himself as he went off with a yellow card. Even getting up in the Leinster fan or Leinster players' faces, getting on top of James Lowe, who was a real thorn in Munster's side for 4 or 5 years. The belief that they should take out of this is absolutely enormous. They've a really tough European draw this year, Munster, so it's not going to be an easy season for them. But they go out of this block. They play Argentina, I think, during the November internationals as well. So that they've got 5 players in the Ireland squad now. They've a couple of really bad injuries out of this game, which is disappointing, especially Gleeson, who I think looked absolutely brilliant in that first 10-15 minutes and looks like an international in waiting. And a dog bowl, again, we just don't produce players of that size. And
what's his injury again? I mean, it's like
a concussion. Gleeson looked like some sort of broken collarbone kind of. Well, I'm speculating, but they said it was an elbow. Sorry, not collarbone, but it was an elbow. It was an arm.
His elbow, yeah.
It was that's a long one, I think, which is disappointing. But there's a confidence there that they can take, and they should be able to build on this. They should be now at the end of this block looking at top in the URC. That should be a realistic game for them. Yeah. If you get 5 wins out of your first 5, which they haven't done yet, and Connacht will be coming down with a point to prove. But if you got that many points out of your first. Not many teams are getting bonus points away at Leinster. You should be targeting a home run through the knockouts, bit of extra cash as well to go into the piggy bank for next year's transfers. They're in a seriously good place, and they deserve to be as well. The two games in the middle weren't great, but Saturday was a really awesome performance.
We're coming up on a year since, out of nowhere, Graham Roundtree's not our coach anymore and all that madness. So yeah. And a nice little edge to the game as well. I was thinking, God, is this bad for Ireland? But then Munster lads are like, well, none of us are in the bloody squad anyway, so it doesn't matter, and have at it. Ian, anything else from the game you want to mention?
It'd be slightly concerning from an Irish perspective.
Definitely.
Leading into the New Zealand game, just the form that some of the guys showed. Is there a bit of a Lions hangover? Yeah, on first inspection, you'd say there is.
Tygburn would say not so much.
No, absolutely, yeah. But I just think, on the flip side, look, you can say it's the first game. Going into a game of that physicality, first up, is far from ideal.
Yeah.
You want to even have one game or even 30, 40 minutes off the bench before you do that. It's just training now doesn't have much full-on contact in it. So when you get into a match like that, you've less time on the ball. How you carry it, how you offload, completely different to what you'd be able to do on a Tuesday.
So that's Ireland very, very, very vulnerable in Chicago, isn't it? Like nothing really is primed here, aside from a few exceptions like Crowley, to have a big game.
And that's why they've come together early. You know, they've an extra 3 training sessions, so they'll probably get 6 sessions in before that game. But the All Blacks are off the back of a rugby championship. They're battle hardened. They've been able to go out, freshen up. All their systems are in place. Their cohesion is there. Whereas Ireland just simply don't have that. Andy Farrell hasn't been in as coach for a year now. So we are definitely going to be the underdogs for that game. But it's not undoable. You know, it's going to be a tight one. But New Zealand definitely have an advantage, being battle hardened.
Yeah, the All Blacks have played 9 games this season, and it's really worrying because even the player, you're talking about training time, but your 2 starting centres probably, 2 of your 3 main centres are going over injured, so they're not going to get much time on the pitch. Ringrose looks like he's in serious need of game time. Like, was there an argument for leaving them all in Ireland and playing another round of URC this weekend and then going next week, which is what they did in 2016, which was a later point in the season because the season has started later now, so there's fewer games.
Good luck. Good luck making that argument to the Irish head coach who hasn't seen them in a year.
Yeah, well, yeah, but like, that's a trade-off though. He's got them in training, but they're very light on game minutes. You know, Dan Sheehan's only minutes are off the bench last week. Jack Conan and Caelan Doris, your 2 candidates to play number 8. Neither of them have played a game this season. Tommy O'Brien's going in, having been pulled from the game at the weekend. He's probably going to be starting on the right wing. He hasn't played for a couple of weeks. He did look very, very sharp. Jamie Osborne's confidence has just been rattled by Munster going after him in the air and getting loads of change out of it. He's your starting fullback, I presume, unless Stockdale gets the nod there. There's big questions. And I think the key is for Andy Farrell to identify in training when they get so they fly to Chicago on Tuesday tomorrow. Yeah. When they get there, pick out the guys who are in flow and in form and pick that team. Because I think picking the regulars on the basis of what they've done before, it didn't work last year. If you remember, they came into that game on the back of a really short lead-in, which is the way it is. Yeah. It's going to be from now on. I watched the first half of that game during last week. You know, Ronan Keller, it's easy to forget all this stuff, but Ronan Keller had a big injury. He'd only played about 12 minutes in the season. He started that game because Sheehan was out. He struggled. They all struggled physically against the All Blacks in that game, and ultimately they lost their way in the game. He went with his old soldiers, didn't get any energy off his bench, and it just ended up kind of dying a death as a game. And there's every chance this November could be very, very difficult because there's so few games and it's a really hard schedule.
It's a curious alchemy team selection, isn't it? Because I on the face of it, everything you said there, 100%. And then I guarantee Andy Farrell will be also thinking to himself, yeah, they all told me to drop Tygburn before the first Lions test. So like there's big game performers.
They all. That was a complete concoction.
Was it?
Farrell, yeah.
But he wasn't playing well though, Tygburn, in advance.
He played his way in and he captained them in the Saturday before. And certainly, whatever about social media, a lot of the predicted teams I saw had both Curry and Byrne in, and Farrell, as is his want and as is his right, concocted a thing where they all wrote you off.
I saw a fair few, definitely English media, saying Byrne nowhere near. Well, definitely.
Certainly not in the Irish media, and I think, I just think, first, like, this is what coaches do, and it was brilliant, but Byrne, there's no one writing him off this time around. It's more who's around them.
Yeah.
You know, Joe McCarthy's a huge loss as well. It's really, it's worrying, but no better man to kind of put it all together than Farrell and get them rallying around the cause. But it's one of his biggest. This whole year, and we'll talk about it next week.
Yeah.
It's a massive challenge for Andy Farrell, and starting off against New Zealand in Chicago on the back of such little game time before you play Australia and South Africa at home with Japan in the middle. It's really hard, but he loves this sort of stuff.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know if you know this about him, but he craves adversity, Andy Farrell.
Yeah, and he'll need it. Like the New Zealand one first up is the really challenging one. Australia, South Africa, I'd have, while I think South Africa are a fair bit better than New Zealand at the moment, I'd have more confidence that we'll beat South Africa because we'll then be battle hardened.
Yeah.
They have had a really long season,
Yeah.
and human nature is you're going to be probably looking forward to a bit of a break after that game, whereas we should be starting to find our feet then.
Yeah,
I've had 2 really good games. But look, they're going to like those 3 games are going to be incredible. I can't wait to see them and blood some young guys against Japan as well.
Yeah. Well, we'll get into all that next week. Fellas, brilliant. So Munster take the spoils in a big way. Brilliant start to URC season. They have Connacht to come Saturday. Will they make it 5-0? Will Connacht bounce back? We'll talk about that next week. And obviously the focus then is majorly in Chicago. When are you travelling over road? Did you make a case that if the team are going tomorrow, I should go tomorrow too?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
My wife wouldn't have allowed that, but I'm going on Sunday. So
Sunday, okay.
we should mention Ulster's win because it was absolutely stunning and a brilliant way to back up that win against the Bulls. And again, from an overall Irish rugby point of view, to have those 2 results is just so healthy for Irish rugby, and even for the Ulster players who are not joining up with the Ireland squad in Dublin. Today they're going to I'm not sure how they're going to get there, but they're going from Durban to Chicago. They're arriving in saying, pick me, look at what we've just done. So that's brilliant. That's one positive side. But going Sunday, and having been there before in 2016, I'm very much looking forward to it. It's a great city. Okay, very good. It's funny, in the Farrell book he says at one stage that when he analyses games, like provincial games from the weekend, he doesn't get, all the coaching software, you can have certain things picked out and you can have everything kind of sped up. He doesn't do any of that. He multi-angles, and he wants to watch everything. He wants to see how a player is walking to a ruck. Is he picking his nose or is he talking to a teammate? And he says it takes him 6 hours to analyse every game.
Wow.
So he's going to have a lot to get through. That's Ian Madigan level of analysis.
Well, speaking of that level of detail, my piece this week's going to be on Munster's double effort, so that'll be out later in the week.
Okay, nice one. Yeah. Rory, thanks a mil.
Thanks, guys.
Ian Madigan, pleasure. Thanks, man.
Thanks a million, Joe. Cheers, Rud.